My neighbour is a wannabe DJ. Every Friday and Saturday night, starting at 11 p.m, he practices his set on his balcony. The bass is so powerful that the pictures on my walls vibrate and my teeth ache. The worst part is the air horn sample he uses every 30 seconds. I went over once to ask him to turn it down, and he just looked at me confused and said, "But this is my creative process, man. You can't put a volume knob on art." The woman next door is convinced she's a private investigator. She has multiple security cameras, but instead of pointing at her own property, they're aimed directly at my front door, my kitchen window, and my backyard. When I finally confronted her about it, she claimed she was monitoring suspicious squirrel activity for a neighbourhood watch report. I've never seen a squirrel look so guilty, apparently. My neighbour decided to take up chainsaw carving as a hobby. He doesn't do it in a garage or a workshop. He does it in his driveway at 8 a.m. on a Sunday. Last week he spent 4 hours carving a life-sized bear out of a log. It sounds like a dentist's office in hell, and now I have to stare at a poorly carved, menacing bear every time I leave my house. He calls it functional yard art. The family to my left has a basketball hoop attached to their garage, which is directly adjacent to my bedroom wall. Their teenage son practices at all hours. The constant rhythmic thump, thump, thump of the ball against the asphalt, followed by the deafening clang off the backboard, has become the soundtrack to my life. His parents say he's chasing his dream, and I should be more supportive of local talent. I have a neighbour who goes through my recycling bin after I put it out on the curb. She doesn't take anything. She just performs an audit. Then she'll catch me the next day and offer unsolicited advice. "I saw you finished a whole case of soda this week. That's a lot of sugar for one person." Or, "That's the 3rd Amazon box this month. Are you doing okay financially?" It's like living next to a judgmental, trash-obsessed accountant. The couple below me has the most theatrical, dramatic arguments I've ever heard. It's not just yelling, it's like a bad stage play. Last week I heard the woman scream, "You promised me the world, Gerald, but all you gave me was this lukewarm lasagna." This was followed by the sound of a plate shattering and him yelling back, "The lasagna is a metaphor for your cold, unfeeling heart." I almost applauded. My neighbour leaves passive-aggressive notes about everything, but he writes them from the perspective of his poodle, Chester. I once parked a couple of inches over the property line, and the next morning there was a note on my windshield in bubbly cursive that read, "Woof! My dad says your big car is scaring the petunias. Please be more careful. Paws and kisses, Chester." I'm being bullied by a poodle. The guy across the street is a composter. Except his version of composting is just throwing all his food scraps into a giant open pile in his front yard. The smell in the summer is breathtakingly awful, and it has attracted an entire ecosystem of rats, raccoons and flies. When someone complained, he got indignant and called it his organic nutrient reclamation station and said we should thank him for being so green. My neighbour feeds the crows. Not just a handful of seeds, she buys huge 50-pound bags of peanuts and dumps them on her lawn every morning. Now, my house is the central headquarters for every crow within a 10-mile radius. There are hundreds. They sit on my roof, scream at dawn, and have completely destroyed my car's paint job. She calls them her feathered sky children. The woman above me is learning to play the violin. She only practices one song, "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star." Over and over and over, each note is a screeching, agonizing journey that sounds like a cat being slowly dragged across a chalkboard. She's been learning this one song for 6 months now. I don't think she's getting any better, but my ears are definitely getting worse. My neighbour decided to build a Zen garden in his backyard. This involved him getting a truckload of gravel and a single large rock. Now, every single morning, without fail, he goes outside for an hour and just rakes the gravel around the rock in circles. The scraping sound is like nails on a chalkboard, and he does it with such intense, silent concentration that it's deeply unsettling to watch. The family next door got a giant inflatable movie screen for their backyard. They host movie nights every weekend. That sounds nice. Except they only watch action movies from the 90s at full volume. My Saturday nights are now an inescapable barrage of explosions and one-liners from Arnold Schwarzenegger. They always invite me over saying, "You can't beat the surround sound out here," as my windows rattle. My neighbour is obsessed with wind chimes. She has at least 50 of them, hanging from every available surface on her porch: bamboo, metal, glass, shell. When even a slight breeze picks up, it sounds like a haunted toy store is being demolished. It's not a gentle tinkling, it's a chaotic, atonal symphony of madness. She says it soothes her soul. It grinds mine into a fine powder. The guy who lives below me is a biohacker. His latest thing is primal screaming therapy. Every morning at sunrise, he goes out onto his tiny patio, beats his chest like Tarzan, and lets out a series of blood-curdling screams to align his chakras. The first time it happened, I thought someone was being murdered, and I called the police. Now, it's just my deeply embarrassing alarm clock. My neighbour bought an old decommissioned ice cream truck. He doesn't sell ice cream. He just sits in it in his driveway and blasts the creepy, tinny music for hours on end. Sometimes he'll just drive it around the block, music blaring before parking it again. When I asked him why, he just stared at me blankly and said, "It reminds me of a simpler time, a much, much louder time." The woman next door talks on her phone on speaker while walking around her yard. It's never a quiet conversation. It's always a deeply personal, dramatic fight with her sister, Brenda. I now know all about Brenda's terrible life choices, her bad taste in men, and the infamous potato salad incident of 2018. I feel like I'm part of the family and I desperately want out. My neighbour has a vendetta against squirrels. He set up a motion-activated sprinkler system aimed at the tree on our property line, but the sensor is so sensitive that it goes off every time a leaf falls or the wind blows. It also, conveniently, soaks the side of my house and my entire garden. He says it's collateral damage in the war on rodents. My petunias did nothing to deserve this. The people who live above me recently got into clog dancing. I know this because they practice on their hardwood floors directly above my living room. It's an aggressive, relentless stomping that usually starts right when I'm trying to watch the evening news. It sounds like a herd of angry wooden-shoed ponies are trapped in their apartment and trying to break free through the floor. My neighbour is an amateur inventor, and his workshop is his garage. His latest invention is some kind of high-powered leaf blower that he claims is jet-propelled. It sounds like a 747 is taking off next to my house. He spends hours just blowing a single leaf from one end of his driveway to the other, making meticulous adjustments to the engine between each test run. The lady across the street collects antique, non-functional lawnmowers. She has about a dozen of them arranged artfully on her front lawn. They're rusted, missing parts, and are slowly being consumed by weeds. She calls it her Museum of Suburban History, and gets deeply offended if anyone suggests she should maybe cut her actual living grass, which is now 3 feet tall. My neighbour is a part-time clown who practices his act in the backyard. This involves him riding a tiny unicycle in circles while honking a horn and juggling bowling pins. He often tries to engage me in the act if he sees me through the window, yelling things like, "Hey neighbour, is this your card?" It's terrifying, and I live in constant fear of making eye contact. The guy next to me is trying to live off the land in his suburban backyard. This means he has 3 chickens and a goat. The goat is constantly trying to eat my fence, and the rooster begins its demonic crowing at 4:15 a.m. every morning. When I complained about the noise, he told me I needed to reconnect with the natural rhythms of the earth. The earth's rhythm is apparently a sleep-deprived nightmare. My neighbour bought a bug zapper, a giant industrial-sized one. It emits a low, ominous hum all night, punctuated by a loud crack zap every few seconds as another unfortunate insect meets its end. It's like trying to sleep in the middle of a tiny electrical battlefield. He proudly told me he eliminated 347 hostiles in a single night. The family to my right has a trampoline, and they put it right against the fence we share. Their kids are on it constantly. So all I see all day long are these disembodied heads popping up and down over my fence screaming. Sometimes they try to talk to me while I'm gardening. "What you doing?" a floating head will yell before disappearing again. It's incredibly disorienting. My neighbour doesn't believe in trash service. He insists on burning all of his garbage in a rusty metal barrel in his backyard. The smell is a toxic cocktail of burning plastic, wet paper, and something that smells suspiciously like old spaghetti. Thick black smoke pours into my yard and through my windows. He calls it reclaiming the elements and getting off the grid. The woman above me has a waterbed. I know this because it has a slow leak, and the water is seeping through her floor and creating a growing brownish stain on my ceiling. When I told her about it, she said she was aware of the moisture transfer, but that her crystals told her not to disturb the flow of energy by fixing it. The flow is now dripping on my couch. My neighbour is a conspiracy theorist who believes that pigeons are government surveillance drones. He spends his afternoons on his roof, wearing a tinfoil hat, trying to catch them with a giant net. He often yells down at me to stay vigilant and not to trust any bird that looks too robotic. It adds a certain level of dystopian dread to my morning coffee. The guy in the apartment next to me is a bodybuilder who grunts loudly. His workout schedule seems to coincide perfectly with when I go to bed. I can hear him through the walls, counting his reps, followed by these guttural primal roars, like he's trying to lift a car. It's either that, or he's fighting a bear. Either way, it's impossible to sleep through. My neighbour decided to paint his house himself. He chose a fluorescent highlighter yellow colour that is so bright it literally glows at dusk. It's like living next to the sun. He didn't use any drop cloths, so there are bright yellow splatters all over our shared fence, my prize-winning azaleas, and a small section of my roof. He said it adds character. The elderly man across the street believes his garden gnomes are alive. He leaves out tiny plates of food for them every evening and has loud, one-sided conversations with them. The other day, I saw him scolding one of them. "Now, Bartholomew, I told you not to point your fishing rod at Mrs. Henderson's cat." I now actively avoid walking on his side of the street.